everyone, welcome to the Decorative Den. My name's Charity and I'm so happy you're here today. The Decorative Den is a look inside my craft room where I share all things crafting, planning, and DIY. And in today's tutorial, I'm going to share with you 3 different ways to take these cardboard cones and transform them into decorative Christmas trees that you can add to any holiday display. Now, I've seen cone Christmas trees like this in several stores, and I have 3 really easy methods for creating really unique and beautiful looking decor. So if you're interested in seeing these options, then just keep watching. So for our first tree, we're going to, of course, need a cardboard cone. We're also going to need some type of paper. You can either use a decorative napkin or tissue paper, some Mod Podge glue, and then a small to medium-sized paintbrush. Now, if you're using a decorative napkin as opposed to tissue paper, the first step is just going to be separating the 2 layers. So most napkins are 2-ply, and all I'm going to be doing here is separating the plain white layer from the printed layer. And this is going to make laying the paper down on the cone so much easier if we just get rid of this kind of unnecessary bottom layer. Now, of course, if you're using tissue paper, you don't need to do this step as it is just a 1-layer material. Now, once your napkin's separated, you're just going to go through and tear off small to medium-sized pieces. And don't worry about these pieces being the same size or same shape. I think the greater variety you have, the more interesting the final tree looks. Now, once that's done, we're going to add the paper to our cone. And we're going to do this using a pretty basic decoupage technique. So just taking our Mod Podge glue and adding it to a small section of the cone, and then taking our paper and layering it over that glue, and then securing it with 1 more layer of Mod Podge. And you can start this really at any point in the cone. You don't need to start in a particular area for this technique. And I'm just going to go through and repeat the same process for the entire cone, making sure to layer the edges of my paper, because that will prevent us from seeing any bits of the cardboard cone underneath. And it also adds some really nice character and color variation to the final product. Now, once you have the whole cone covered, we're just going to set that aside to dry so that our Mod Podge becomes clear. And here is our final product. So once this is dry, it's easier to detect any little missed spots or areas you want to touch up. So here I have a little area of the cardboard cone showing through. I also have this really large area that I would like to add some more layers to. So all I'll do in these cases is just go back and add a few more pieces of paper in that same technique. But moving on to our next tree, again, we're going to need a cardboard cone. For this one, we're also going to need some kind of jute cord or twine, and it can be natural fiber or dyed. I'm also going to be using some hot glue as well as a pair of scissors. Now for this tree, we are going to start at the tip of the cone, and all I'm going to do is place a dab of hot glue at the top and then attach my twine to the cone so that it is vertically sticking above the top of the cone. And we're doing this because we want to cover that top point of the cone so none of the cardboard is showing. Now, once your cord is secure, you're just going to fold it over the top of that cone, and you're going to secure it to the opposite side with another dab of hot glue. And when I'm doing this, I like to hold the cord in place for a little bit just to make sure my glue is dry and that it is secure to the top. Once that's secure, you're going to take your cord and just wrap it around the cone. I like to wrap it about 3 or 4 times around the top to make sure that that snipped end of the cord that we laid down first is completely covered and that you can't see any part of the cardboard at the top of the cone. Once you've wrapped that a few times, you're just going to secure it with some hot glue and then continue wrapping. And I use this same technique until the entire cone is covered. So just wrapping my cord tightly about 3 or 4 times, laying down some hot glue, and then wrapping the cord again. Now, once I get to the bottom, this is when I actually snip off the cord from the roll, and that just ensures that I have one continuous piece of cord that I use for the entire tree. And then I just secure that with a dab of hot glue, and this one is finished. So moving on to our third and final tree, again, you're going to need a cardboard cone, some hot glue, some medium to large size pine cones, and I used about 8 of these to cover the small cone. I'm also going to be using some scissors and needle nose pliers. So the first step is taking apart our pine cones. And this is not a difficult step, but it is a time-consuming one. And to do this, I found the best method is when my pine cones are completely dry, using my needle nose pliers to kind of grip each piece at the base and rock it back and forth until it breaks off of the body of the pine cone. And so I just go through and do this with 1 or 2 layers, and then I take my scissors and cut off any extra material so that way I can very easily access the next layer of petals. So you're just going to go through and do this for multiple pine cones. Depending on the size, you might need anywhere from 8 to 10 to cover one of those small cardboard cones. And when you're done, you're going to have a variety of different sizes. So you're going to have some pieces that are longer and some short pieces that broke off kind of close to the edge. I like to avoid using these short pieces if at all possible, because the longer your pieces are, the easier it'll be to use them. I also like to save these thinner pieces that I'm setting aside for the top of my cone, as well as to fill in any awkward gaps I have. So for the base of our tree, we're going to want these larger pieces. So I start by just kind of pulling out some of my larger pieces of pine cone. And then once I have a good selection, I take my cone and starting at the base, just add a dab of hot glue. And I'm going to use that to secure an individual piece of pine cone. Now for this first layer here at the bottom of the cone, it's really important that these pieces are flush with the edge of the cone, so that way what your finished tree will sit flat on any table or space you're displaying it on. So while I'm putting down this first layer, I like to every so often just check by placing my cone on the table to make sure that everything is flush and even with this first layer. So you're just going to repeat that process until you get all the way around the tree. And then we're going to move on to the next layer. And I like to start this next layer putting my first piece kind of offset from the previous layer, so it lays in between 2 of the pieces on the previous layer. It's also important to make sure that each layer overlaps the one you placed previously. And we do this so that way you don't see any of those weird jagged edges from the previous layer. And it also just looks, I think, really nice and kind of like a natural pine tree when each layer overlaps the previous one. And I just continue that same process until the entire cone is covered. And that's it, guys. For this one, I do leave the top of the cone exposed since that brown cardboard does blend well with the pine cone colors. And that'll do it for this video. Here are the 3 cone Christmas trees we made. Each one is really unique and different from the others, but I think they work really well together. Thank you so much for being here today, guys. I really appreciate it, and I hope you feel inspired to make some decor of your own. In general, please subscribe if you are interested in other craft tutorials, planning videos, or DIY projects, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, guys!